hopefully we don't have to flee. I'd like to now introduce Mr. Mike Powell from the Saskatchewan Parks and Recreation Association, who is also the sponsor of this session, so thank you very much, SPRA. And he will give a brief biography of each of our speakers, and we'll go from there. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Hi, I'm Mike Powell. I'm the current president of the Saskatchewan Parks and Recreation Association, and I get to interview, that would be way more fun. I just get to introduce our speakers for today. So first of all, Harvey Linen is president of HG Linen Associates, a Saskatchewan consulting firm specializing in planning, organizational development, training, research, communications, strategy, and public consultations. For more than 20 years, the firm has provided services to the public sector at all levels, as well as the private sector and non-governmental organizations. Harvey's conducted strategic planning for a number of municipalities, as well as I got a little throat thing going if you haven't noticed. Municipal studies on topics as varied as economic development, human resources, and immigration. Our next speaker is Norm Campbell. He's been involved in the recreation field for over 35 years and only looks 40 years old. He started his career with the City of Moose Jaw as a recreation programmer, has continued to work with the city's parks and recreation department in various capacities, including facility supervisor, capital project coordinator, and of course recreation director. In 2000, Norm was hired as the CEO of the Saskatchewan Parks and Recreation Association. At a national level, Norm has represented Saskatchewan at the Canadian Recreation and Facilities Council and is currently on the board of the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association. Norm also sits as a member of the writing team that is drafting the Pathways to Wellbeing, which is a framework for recreation in Canada. Our final speaker today is Sean McEachran. He began as SUMA's Director of Policy and Communications in March of 2013. Previously, Sean served as SUMA's Senior Policy Advisor. He's been with SUMA since 2006. Prior to joining SUMA, Sean spent 3 years as a Special Assistant to the former Federal Minister of Finance, the Honourable Ralph Goodale. Sean holds a Bachelor of Education degree from the U of R, and in his time here, you've probably engaged with Sean through one of his various policy files. He's handled the Public Safety File, the Health File, SUMA, Asset Management, Infrastructure, and others. Sean has experience in board governance and bylaw review and development. So, let's bring him up.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Harvey Lennon. Good to see you. Good to see a good crowd out on a cold day like this. The subject matter here is collaboration, and we're practicing what we preach here by having 3 speakers for you. That sounds daunting, but the good news is because there's 3 of us, we all have to keep our remarks very short, and so I'm going to do that. I'm going to provide a little of the background leading towards the collaboration guide that we're talking about today. This document was the outcome of the project that we're talking about that we began early in 2014 and finished at the end of the year, and the document is available at the SPRA booth down in the trade show down below us. And we encourage you to get a copy. We're going to talk about that, and my role here is to talk about how we led up to the creation of the guide. My colleagues will talk more about what's specifically in the guide that you can use and how you can apply that and how you might find ways to make sense of that in terms of looking at your recreation potential in your communities. So that's the cover of the guide, intermunicipal collaboration in recreation. And it's meant to be a guide. It's meant to be a process that allows you to work through your solutions using processes that seem to have been proven. going to give you a quick project overview. SPRA and SUMA call this a progressive partnership, and that's a good description of it. The two organizations first together began to identify the need, which we'll talk about shortly, but they identified that. They engaged their members at the two conventions last year, so early in 2014, at the SPRA convention, at the SUMA convention. These were items in workshops and garnered a lot of input from the participants there. I'm sure some of you were part of that. Jointly, they funded the project, and jointly they managed it. And I will tell you, as the outside consultant who was hired to conduct the work of it, it was a very tight and very comprehensive management. They were closely involved in the project and had a lot of input and a lot of guidance over the direction of the project. Here's a look at what the project really involved in three major pieces. The first was research. We called it an environmental scan, but it was a research to assess the activity and the experience in terms of collaboration in the area of recreation amongst municipalities in Saskatchewan. So we first conducted that research. I'll talk about that and what we found in a moment. The next was, based on what we found out in that research, to develop a guide, to develop a tool that people could use and apply into that situation which we had researched to assist municipalities. And then throughout that process, both in the research process and throughout the development of the guide, there was a great deal of consultation and testing of the ideas at every stage, testing what we heard to say, this is what we're hearing here, what do you think about it, and testing at different levels. I'll talk a little bit about how we did that, and taking the guide as it was developed through several phases and several steps, honing it, changing it, making it better, making it more effective as we got feedback. So a lot of work from a lot of people, from a lot of municipalities have gone into the project. Let's take a first look at what went into the research project. We had really two major rounds of research and some ongoing feedback. The first round was exploratory interviews. We identified approximately 30 municipalities where there seemed to be something happening or had happened or was talking of happening in terms of municipalities working together, collaborating on a recreation file of some sort. We did interviews with each of those 30 municipalities. Out of that first round, we selected about 10 that seemed to have more activity going, and we went back and did much more in-depth interviews with each of those 10 municipalities. Throughout the process as well, we had an ongoing focus group of municipal recreation leaders who we checked with several times throughout the project while we were gathering research, as part of gathering research, feeding back and sharing what we heard through the research, and then as we developed the guide, getting their feedback into the guide. So these were professionals in the recreation world working within municipalities. In addition, we consulted with a group of elected leaders from municipalities across the province, different sizes of communities, who also gave us their feedback on what we were hearing and the direction that the guide was going in. And then throughout the process, the SUMA SPRA management team was constantly part of that feedback and advisory cycle to us as the team that was developing the guide, and they in turn went back to their staffs, and so the staff from those two associations were looking at it step by step as we went through to feedback. Here's the kind of thing we found when we did the research, just really quickly. The first question was demonstrating that there was in fact a need for this kind of a guide. That came out real clear. Very hard to get a collaboration project started. And a message we heard from across the municipalities was it's hard to get it rolling. How do we do that? Show us ways of doing it. What can we learn from others about ways of doing it? A second point was that the value of cooperation is often not recognized. That was one of the hurdles that elected officials and recreation professionals who are looking at developing something in terms of recreation outside of there, across with a kind of a regional view. They met that problem a lot. People just don't put the value on recreation. It is not seen as being as significant a contributor to the health and welfare and therefore the growth potential of communities as it ought to be. That was one of the challenges that they face. Related to that was the whole concept of regional thinking. We know that regional thinking is developing. You can see it everywhere here in Saskatoon today, where there's lots of activity happening, lots of thinking and planning on a regional basis. And a lot of cooperation happens in a lot of areas. We see that in fire safety, we see that in water and sewage, and we see in a lot of areas. But it's hard to get that thinking, that regional thinking applied to recreation. That's the message we heard over and again. People just don't see that. When you put up those boundary lines between municipalities, they break down. In some areas you can work across them, but when it comes to recreation, they tend to, those boundary lines tend to become walls between cooperation and collaboration. So that was another challenge that needed to be addressed. All of these items, I'm telling you, are the findings because they affected how we developed the guide and what went into the guide. We found out that where there are successful projects, they depend on long-term agreements between municipalities. That was the key thing that was pointed to. There has been long-term relationships, long-term agreements. And those relationships that accompany the agreements were critical. The ability of people to work in a cooperative, collaborative spirit, to want to maintain the work, the collaboration amongst municipalities, that was critical. And one of the risks that would happen with recreation projects was if people would change and their views about collaboration would change, projects could be at risk. So that was an important aspect. And then the last finding we had was that there's no single process for cooperation. We did not discover the magic key that would say if you just do this, everything works. All of a sudden, there's collaboration. All of a sudden, people recognize that thinking regionally has value in recreation, and things start to percolate in the world of recreation. There isn't a single one. There has to be then a sense of what are the principles that need to be applied in order to get collaboration moving, and how can you apply that, and how can you adapt that and adopt that in your own situation so that you're applying best practices and best ideas, but you're doing it in a way that is appropriate to the situation that you are in with you and your neighboring municipalities. So let me just quickly close by giving you a quick overview then of what's in the guide, how we structured it, and my colleagues will talk a little bit more about the details of what's in that guide, how to use it. The first thing that we put in there was a clear rationale, because the research told us that people often don't get it. They don't see the value of recreation for community growth, or they don't see the understanding of the value of collaboration and thinking on a regional terms. So part of this guide is laying out the argument and the rationale so that those of you who are working towards collaboration are armed with the arguments and the information you need to make the case in your particular communities. Then we look at sort of a concept for action. What are the ingredients that are required to get action happening, to get people collaborating and thinking regionally on recreation projects? We divided those into three primary areas in the guide. We break those down in great detail, but in a general sense, it's about the people, it's about identifying and engaging community champions, just getting community engagement, involvement, what that means, and how to do it, and the guide talks about that. It's about clearly documenting the benefits, really establishing numerically what you need, what the need is, and what the perceived outcomes are, so it's clear to the community and clear to the decision makers what the benefits are of acting collaboratively. And then third, about structure, about setting up a process and a structure so that working on collaboration has a formal framework in which it can function. And we talk about that in the guide. In addition to the guide, besides laying out the rationale, giving you that sort of three-part concept of how to move forward on collaboration, the recreation guide also includes a lot of practical help. So if you pick up the guide, it looks like this. I encourage you to pick one up. A good part of it in the back half of the guide are frameworks, formats, layouts, suggestions, model agreements, various things that can help you, that you can take and adapt into your own particular situation. And in addition, we provide a long list of resources and people and other materials that you can access. So, thank you very much for first off, for the chance to be able to engage with SUMA and with SPRA on this project. It's been very exciting. It's been very enlightening along the path. Secondly, thank you for being here. I encourage you to follow closely on my colleagues as they talk about applying this document. I encourage you to ask questions, and I encourage you to make your way down to the SPRA table downstairs and get a copy of this and spend a little time with it and see how it may apply to your particular situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harvey, for providing that information on the work that you did with respect to the guide, and definitely on behalf of SUMA, we appreciate the work that you did, and I think we've ended up with a document that I think will be quite valuable to urban municipalities in Saskatchewan. I want to mention a few things with respect to what Harvey had mentioned on the guide itself. So the trade show actually opens up tomorrow, so you won't be able to pick up the guide today, but it will be available tomorrow. The SPRA booth is booth 108, so I would encourage you to, when you walk through the trade show tomorrow, to pick up one of these guides. We will be actually tracking the communities that have picked up the guide, because we'd like to be able to see who's accessed the document, and maybe perhaps over time we'll look at some opportunities to sort of manage or at least measure who's actually using some of the information from the guide that we've produced. So a component of what I'm going to talk about here briefly is a little bit some of the details within the guide, just to provide a little background in terms of what type of information is available to municipalities to help out with respect to recreation projects within their municipality and collaborating with other municipalities as well. I want to be clear, this is about collaborating with all types of municipalities, whether it be urbans and urbans or urbans and rurals. We're open, this document is there to help you sort of facilitate those conversations, establish that process, and eventually come up with an agreement on multiple different opportunities on recreation collaboration. So first off, in terms of the rationale, I mean, Harvey had spoken briefly about SPRA and SUMA working together on a partnership. We've heard from our members, at least for myself, I can speak from SUMA's side, we've heard from our members there's an interest in working collaboratively on recreation. One of the biggest challenges, of course, is how do we go about doing that? How do we start that conversation with our neighbors around recreation? We've heard stories of, really, I've had some mayors and councillors say it's really all about the money. We just go to our neighbors and say we need money, and it doesn't seem to always work. Why is that? And I think what you're going to find out of this guide is there's more to it than just simply going to the other municipality and saying, do you want to give us some money for our hockey rink? I think you need to provide the rationale for it and a sound sort of business case as to why you want to collaborate on that. So the other motivation, of course, was with respect to a lot of the growth that we're seeing in Saskatchewan. Substantial amount of growth in the last number of years in terms of population, immigration, people moving in not only back home who have moved away, but new people moving into the country and so on. We're seeing growth particularly around a lot of urban centers, cities and towns, and rural residential properties around those large urban centers. So there's a great desire to start addressing some of this growth with recreation. And there's just a little quote here that actually came out of Saskatchewan's plan for growth. So Saskatchewan communities are growing and will continue to grow because more young people are staying in Saskatchewan. More families are moving home, and more new families from across Canada and around the world are choosing Saskatchewan as the place to be. And recreation is definitely an important component of providing a higher standard of living within your municipality. So families today are changing the way they think about their communities as well. There's higher expectations, more and more. There's other opportunities out there. So when they come to your community, they're looking for the types of services they need to maintain a standard of living, a quality of life that we've all grown to sort of be accustomed to and want to continue to offer. So their expectations are growing, and they clearly compare their various different lifestyle options in different locations. And I will reiterate this probably over and over again. Recreation is a and of course, recreation is a high priority in their overall decision about the type of community that they would be interested in living in or moving to. So on the regional thinking side, we have, I know at SUMA, the provincial government. There's a tremendous amount of talk around regional services and trying to get that regional thinking mindset in place within local councils. And in the recreation context, that's a very important thing as well, particularly in the context of citizens are thinking more regionally as well. Now, no longer are they just simply living in one community. They're looking within the broader surroundings around their town, their village, their city, and they're interacting more often with people. So, easiest way to say it is sort of rural and urban families are becoming more homogeneous population as they seek the lifestyle they desire and the opportunities they need. So they're looking more and more to councils and so on to start to address some of those regional opportunities. Harvey spoke very briefly about some of the examples we already see out there, and a lot of them are very positive examples, and they do quite well. Fire service is the one that I'm most familiar with. You know, we know a lot of municipalities, both urban and rural, and even municipalities with First Nations communities, agreements around fire service. They value the service, it's an important thing to have, so they find ways to collaborate on that, whether it be through mutual training, cost sharing, and ultimately the fire service agreements that exist. We see it in water and wastewater treatment, transportation, economic development, and regional planning. They may not be as complex as some of the fire service agreements I've seen, but obviously there's conversations going on around the province around how do we deliver water and wastewater. It's a very expensive service to provide. Regionalized services help alleviate some of those costs and ensure that everyone has the right resources they need to sustain their community and so on. The one thing we've identified that, of course, when you start talking about regionalization and various other opportunities, recreation is too often taken for granted. Recreation is just, it's there, you know, it's a service we provide, but it's not necessarily on you know, one of the main priorities that local councils discuss. So, clearly not given a strategic priority as you know, other services that municipalities offer, but the service is still there. And what that can lead to is insufficient resources. So you may have a hockey rink, you may have a curling rink, you may have some programming, but ultimately the conversations happening around council are not about how can we ensure that recreation is to the service level that our residents expect. It's just sort of, let's just provide it, and then we sort of turn our wheels around how do we find money for it. So resources aren't necessarily always properly funded. Inadequate facilities and programs. We all know that infrastructure is extremely expensive. Hockey rinks, curling rinks, gymnasiums, community centers and so on. These are all facilities that help provide a good recreational opportunity within your community. They are expensive. It needs to become part of your strategic priorities and planning moving forward as you start to grow as to how do we ensure that we have those facilities and they remain sustainable. And then communities without amenities need to attract and retain citizens. That's probably one of the key drivers around this. You can have people living in your community. If you don't provide recreation, I can guarantee you it's that one service that people will start to demand. And when we say recreation, it's not just always hockey and curling and baseball and so on. It's things for younger population of your community and even the older population. So seniors activities, recreation is a broad scope, and it's important that you start to have those conversations and look for opportunities to provide those services, build those facilities, and cost share opportunities with your neighbors. What I would say with respect to community plans, ultimately, people will be looking to the municipalities for leadership. Quite often we see a lot of recreation, although there are professionals, paid professionals that provide programming and various different leadership. Ultimately, a lot of times recreation programming in a community is led through volunteers. Parents, family members who either coach hockey or run various different programs and so on. And when we start to have that conversation about regionalization of recreation, they're going to go back to their local councils and say, ultimately, we need you to be the leaders in the community to do that. I'll give you a prime example of what we see with respect to doctor recruitment. A lot of communities have challenges with doctors. Healthcare is not a responsibility of local governments, but more and more we're starting to see communities go to the local councils and say, look, we've elected you, we have some expectations, we're looking for you to lead on that particular initiative, we're looking for you to help out. And what we're seeing is communities around the province, of course, making investments on doctor recruitment and healthcare. And that's, I sort of look upon that, and that's really what recreation is as well. The it's a service that needs to be provided, it's a valuable service to your residents, and ultimately the volunteers and the people who are participating in that will come to council and say, you know, we need some leadership on it. And ultimately, recreation is a priority, is a service that municipalities are actually, you know, mandated to provide within their municipalities. So it's an important one to consider. So ultimately, you know, in a very brief quote, you know, this requires a strong municipal vision and a dedication to long-term relationships. As Harvey said, we saw a number of different examples of collaboration that exists out there. Most of the strong ones are due to a long-term relationship with whether it be administrators or councillors or friends and so on. What we're trying to drive through this project is actually trying to formalize those agreements. Too often we heard examples of, you know, back in 1965, Mayor Bob and Mayor Jim from here or whatever shook their hand and said, yeah, we'll share some money on recreation. We'll give you $1,000 a year, and that's continued on. The unfortunate reality is that could be lost at any point in time, and you know, was it really you know, a good decision at the time? Did it really respond to the needs of the community? Maybe yes, maybe no, but clearly now in the 21st century and with the growth we're seeing, it's clearly not the type of arrangement that needs to be in place. So how do we work to find a more suitable solution? So part of the guide we looked at, you know, as Harvey said, you know, we look at a little bit sort of the background, the underpinnings, the foundation for recreation, and why we need to have a conversation about regionalization and collaboration on it. And part of the guide is then sort of stepping into it and getting your feet wet and saying, okay, if we want to do this, how do we start doing it? You know, what is the process for taking action? The first one is, of course, you know, a little bit around consistent leadership, champions from your community. So you need to find you know, some of those people in your community, I already said, sort of volunteers, people who are leading on recreation already, people who have an interest, a vested interest in that particular service, and also ultimately a vested interest in your community and seeing it better. A commitment to collaboration. I think the easiest way to say it is collaboration is better than competition. You know, it's we heard on numerous occasions, you know, well, we don't want to work with the other community because, you know, we're in competition with them on sports teams and various other things. And, you know, that's healthy to have, but when it really comes down to it and you're trying to provide a service to your municipalities, you need to sort of push off that competition and come together as citizens of the province and find ways to ensure that you can provide recreation on a regional model. Building relationships. Once again, you know, leadership is important, but ultimately a lot of times, and no matter what scenario you're looking at, when it comes to government and so on, relationships are key. It's amazing the things you can accomplish when you have strong relationships, and this is a key component of this initiative as well. Finding those relationships, finding the decision makers, the influential people within the community who have the ability to sort of move these things forward. And identifying mutual benefits, benefit from a cooperative initiative. So what are the common interests that exist between the municipalities? I want to start to have this conversation about regional collaboration on recreation. And then, of course, looking for the volunteers, realizing the larger community and the momentum that's currently in place. There's a lot of energy out there when it comes to recreation. People are really passionate about, you know, their sports teams, their various different community centers and the things and programs they provide. You need to find those people and build on that momentum. Take that energy and use it to drive the process forward. So the process that we propose, that you sort of roll through, and a lot of the templates in the back of the guide will help you out with some of this work. I would add that eventually the guide will be available electronically on the SPRA site and SUMA's, and all the templates and resources will also be available in sort of Word documents, so you have the ability to download them and then modify them to fit your scenario. You'll see in the template they're sort of designed just to sort of fit in the guide, but ultimately you can take them and use them for your own. And that includes, you know, the different agreements, the sample budget for a regional recreation program. That's we stole an example from a municipality. So your current situation. So first off, review your situation. What are the challenges? This is where you need to really have that sort of soul-searching conversation with council, with your community. What are the key things that you need within your municipality? What are the recreational services people are demanding? You know, is a pool a priority? Yes, probably. Is a hockey rink a priority? Maybe. Is curling? Well, you know, maybe not. Ball diamonds. You know, there's various different examples of things that you need to start to have the conversation about. What types of things do we need, but perhaps we don't need our own, that we could perhaps share with another municipality, that we could, you know, join with them on that particular project. So you need to review your situation, you know, define what's important to you and what isn't. Planning for collaboration. Next one, sort of the people. Find people to drive the process. As I said before, it's those champions in your community. It's the people who have the passion for recreation. It's the volunteers. It's even the paid professional staff as well. Engage them in the process. They're the ones that are going to be really involved and will want to drive it and continue to have it go forward. We see it time and time again in other projects within communities, whether it be a spray pad or it's a new facility, hospital foundations and so on. You find those individuals who are really passionate about that item, and they will drive the process and make sure that all the critical processes and paths are taken in order to achieve what you're looking for. I'm an educator. I'm trained to be a teacher. One of the things we're always taught is structure is the most important thing in the classrooms, and very much in my workday life and so on, I enjoy structure. I like things. I like processes, and this is a key thing that we identified in this. Have a structured process in terms of how you're going to start the conversation, do some of the consultation, engage community members, engage outside community members, and eventually roll into some sort of agreement on whatever initiative you're looking for. You need to have that structured process so people understand what you're ultimately trying to do and your end game. It helps people sort of understand it's that element of transparency. So they know it's not just a bunch of people deciding to try to do something. You've got a documented process and people can follow it clearly. I would say, once you've sort of gone through that process of reviewing your situation, you've identified sort of your priorities. The one thing that we learned from a number of communities, as I said, the example of, recreation's expensive, we need more money, so we're going to go next door to town A and we're going to say, we know all your kids come and play hockey in our community, I think you should give us some money to help run the facility. Well, maybe that'll work. Chances are it probably won't. But what we're saying is, before you go have that conversation, do some of your analysis. Start to collect some of the data. Look at who uses your facilities, what are some of the costs associated with it. It's all part of that building that business case for why you need to sort of go down the path of collaboration on recreation on a regional perspective. It's an important thing to do. Just knee-jerk sort of, we just need to do something doesn't necessarily always work. Build that evidence base in order to have that conversation. So this is a graphical example of sort of what the process is, and I think it shows it quite clearly in terms of what we're suggesting is a good way to go. So first off, you do your current situation. Municipalities pursuing separate independent recreation solutions. We see it all the time. We've got a municipality A, municipality B, they're maybe 20 minutes apart from each other. The communities work together on multiple different things. People may work in the two different communities, they may live in the other one, and they share, they either maybe go to the same school in a community, but when it comes to recreation, for some reason, everyone needs to have their own hockey rink, everyone needs to have their own curling rink, and all these various different things. And that's great, and I think that scenario worked really well in our province a long time ago, but we now know that with the infrastructure deficit that a lot of communities are facing, water, wastewater, these are very important things. When it comes down to recreation, it's a key service, but it's an expensive service to provide as well, and we really need to start having those conversations with our neighbors about how do we continue to provide recreational services and programs and facilities and so on while keeping those sort of costs down and providing that level, that quality of life that people are expecting. So, it's that current situation. It's part of that analyzing what currently is going on and what perhaps we could do better. And then going into the planning for collaboration. So it's the people, engaging the people locally, externally, the elected, the non-elected, your champions, your volunteers, all those individuals, getting them together, starting to have that conversation, starting to do some of the work that needs to be done within that process. Starting to collect some of the information. Now, obviously, data collection doesn't necessarily need to happen right in one specific point. You'll probably start, as you roll through the process, collect various different pieces of information. But I would say it's an important thing to do. You have an evidence-based argument that you can go forward to the different municipalities in your region, and it helps out a lot. You can say, well, we know this many people use these facilities. We know, this is what our costs are with respect to these things. And these are the types of priorities that we've identified and we want to roll forward. And this is the type of funding that we need to in order to do these types of initiatives. And then the process to creating the collaborative leadership process, engaging all those people as well in that overall initiative. And lastly, sort of the benefits. So shared solutions for facilities, programs, services, costs, managements, and benefits. So, the end game is ultimately to try to find a way to work together to provide recreation on a regional level still maintaining, meeting the expectations of residents, still maintaining the services you perhaps currently do, but at the same point in time, creating a new environment when it comes to recreation and trying to get those sort of structured agreements in place. As I said previously, we know of a lot of municipalities around there. There's some that get substantial funding from other municipalities, but it's nothing really written down, no legal document, and that money and those arrangements could be taken away at any point in time. And what we're encouraging you to do, and through using the tools in this document, is try to solidify those agreements, try to find those parts that you can come together with your municipalities within your region and solve your recreational challenges. And I think this is part of yours, Norm. Sorry. There we go.
Thanks, Sean. My part of the presentation today is to talk about support. As we went through this, I think it's fairly evident that it has to come from the community. It can't be somebody else coming in and say, do this, do this. It has to come from the community. You need champions, you need people that are dedicated to it. But in a lot of cases in communities, yeah, that's great, it's got to come from the community, but how do I get started? What support services are out there? So what I'd like to talk about is some of the support services provided by SUMA, provided by the Saskatchewan Parks and Recreation Association, and provided by some of the sport, culture, and recreation districts that are out there. And these will be on-the-ground things, and I'm going to share some tools that you can actually work through, and I'll briefly go through some of them so you get a better understanding of, you know what, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are things that you can actually do that are in place, and I'll show how we have some of our staff that will help guide you through all that. But before I do that, it's important that we get to the whole idea of it's not just done for the money, and it's not the show me the money concept or all that kind of stuff. Because when you take a look at the research that's out there, and we've done a lot of research into the benefits of recreation, and I know everyone understands how important it is to your community, but if you're looking for something to go to a council or go to a neighboring municipality to talk about how important recreation is, here's some things you should be aware of. Number one, I think we all understand the physical benefits. We're talking sports, we're talking culture, we're talking 4-H, we're talking anything that people do in their spare time that is positive, so there's no illegal stuff going on, but it's positive and you're doing it for your own self-experience. So we know the physical side, but there's a lot of interest now into the mental health and the understanding that people that participate in recreation programs and communities that have valuable recreation programs actually have healthier mental health. The mental health of their citizens are a lot better, less chances of depression, and one of the things that's come out is there is a less incidence of suicides. So if you take a look at some of the horrendous things that are happening in some communities about teen suicides, some of the research is showing that people that are engaged, youth that are engaged in recreation activities are far less likely to have those kind of mental problems. The other thing that's there as well is the social benefits, less vandalism, a lot less depression. And one of the things that's really interesting, especially with all the new Canadians that are coming to join us, is we've been finding in our research that if someone's coming into your community and sometimes they don't have the same kind of thought processes that we do because they come from a different place. If you can get them involved in some of these recreation activities and have them come out, and whether it's to a theater group or whether it's to just help out at the rink or whether it's to help out in the concession, whatever it is, they get climatized, for want of a better word, a lot faster, and then they start to become part of your community and don't feel quite ill at ease. The quality of life thing has been mentioned a couple times. Definitely it shows that people who have quality recreation programs do feel like the quality of life is higher, and they're more likely to stay in your community and more likely to move to your community. Economic generators, kind of self-explanatory. People get jobs, whether it's lifeguards, play leaders, maintenance people, and it's also known in some of the larger communities for sure, if you have a house near a park, the value of your house is a lot more. The one I think is the most important that we sometimes forget is the community connectivity and attachment. You know, recreation, when you take a look at every other service that communities provide, how many times do you actually see people volunteering to, I don't know, do the roads or that kind of stuff? They don't, simply because, well, they have city workers that do it, but at the same time, people volunteer for recreation in all kinds of things. They coach, they man the concession, they do the outdoor rink. They flood it on their own because it's important to them. By doing that, they start to feel a sense of community. They start to feel how important they are in the community. They see the difference they're making, and they realize that, you know what, this is my community and I'm a big part of it. And the last research we've done is around community resilience, and the reason this is so important is Dr. Jacqueline Nescu, who's actually from Limerick, did a lot of research in Limerick and the surrounding towns and found out a couple of things. Number one is small communities are resilient. And the reason they're resilient is because people come and go, things happen to them, but they always seem to manage to find ways to do things. They always seem to manage to get by or work towards a common goal. And she drew a string to the fact that in a lot of those communities that are the most resilient, they have participation and engagement by their citizens, and it's usually through recreation. The fact that the people are out volunteering, the fact that they have shared experiences, they identify with their communities, and that they're engaged in their community is a huge fact on why communities are so resilient. Oh, there's a sec, I lost my little clicker here. There we go. So what's happening out there? You're not alone, for sure. It's happening. It's not happening at the same level as maybe we'd like. But here's some of the things that are happening, and then I'm going to give you some actual examples of where it's happening, and then I'll talk about how you can get in touch with those people if you want to talk to them. Programs and services. This is happening in various pockets. It would be nice if we could formalize it so we can get it going, but it is happening. So, for example, someone's got a fitness leader who happened, here's a selfless plug, who happened to take the SPRA fitness program, and they're now a qualified fitness leader. They've got a leader, someone else has got a hall, they want to run things, they get together. Play leaders. People have taken the High Five program or have taken the Play Leadership program, and they've decided, you know what, there's not enough work here for just this community, so let's have a traveling playground, and Tuesday, Wednesday I'll go to your community, Monday, Tuesday, or Monday, Thursday go to mine. And they move the playground program around so the kids start to get not only a valuable work experience, but the kids that play in the program get a valuable play experience. The critical mass piece is hugely important. Harvey mentioned it, but it's also, I guess the best example is hockey teams. How many towns don't have enough to have one hockey team, so they get together with all the other communities? Not just hockey, it happens in everything. How many towns want to have a theater thing? And it's a great fundraiser where, you know, you get together and you do your acting and stuff, but a lot of times you need that critical mass of all the communities coming together to do it. And that's what's happening in a lot of cases. The capital construction retrofits, you've seen that. A lot of that is happening in grants. I will give you a couple examples where there's a little bit different thing happening. But the capital construction retrofits is, there's grants out there, you can give some of your population to another community. Hopefully you get some kind of an operating agreement so you're working together on it. But that happens mostly at grant time, but there are other options. And then staffing is one that's becoming really, really popular as far as there's not enough critical mass in one community to hire a recreation professional, whether it's a director or whether it's a facility operator. So what they do is they actually share the cost, and that recreation professional will go and work in 3 or 4 different communities and run the rinks, or will train the maintenance staff and what have you. So that's all happening. Again, it's not happening across the province, but there are pockets of where we're seeing collaboration and where we're seeing it work very well. So here's some of the examples that I said that I talked to you about. Towns and RM sharing the cost of the recreation director and sharing the cost of the recreation department. Good example in Eston and the RM of Snipe Lake. They actually have a funding split where they pay for the services, they pay for the wages, they've signed bylaws. They recently updated their bylaws in 2004. They sit on the rec board and they work together to try recreation services. Another one is RMs allocating some of their assessment to towns. This is a real interesting one, and it's actually happening in the RM of Frenchman Butte, Paradise Hills, St. Walburg, Turtleford, and the Hutterite Colony, Fort Pitt, Inc. And what happens is the RM has recognized that, you know what, we use a lot of services in these communities, we should be paying for some of them. And they actually take some of their tax assessment, and through a formula based on school divisions and how many houses and population and all that, they give a base rate to each community and then a per capita rate to support the recreation services. And then they'll have to make sure it goes to recreation services, obviously. But that's one of the a progressive kind of thing that's happening out there as well. Joint operations of regional parks. This is happening quite a bit. There's a real good example down in Radville and with the RM of Laurier and the Laurier Regional Park, where in this instance, the regional park actually owns a lot of the facilities. So what these three organizations or municipalities are doing is they're actually sharing the cost of operating and they're sharing the cost of capital improvements. They have just rewritten a bylaw where all three of them are signing off on it, and they just did that just last year. So again, it's another example of it's a regional park they're working with, whereas before maybe it was a municipal kind of facilities. The capital cost sharing, as I mentioned, it's happening in a number of different places on an informal basis, and it's a matter of, hey, I need some help with this, can you help me out? I need some help with equipment, and they're recognizing that yes, they can do that. Part of the problem that comes up is exactly what Sean had mentioned, is it happened a while back, there's nothing down in writing, so you're not really sure who owns the equipment, how it depreciates and all that kind of stuff. So it's important to try and formalize some of these relationships. One that I put in there that's really interesting is the Recreation Foundation, and this is actually happening in Rosetown, the RM of St. Andrews, the RM of Pleasant Valley, and the RM of Marriott and Mountain View. And what they've actually done is they've created a separate foundation specifically dedicated to recreation and recreation services. And each community or each municipality puts some money towards this foundation. They each have a representative on the foundation, and then that foundation takes grant adjudications from the various places and adjudicates money to go out. In most cases, it's been for capital projects, but it doesn't have to be. But it's just another example of how people are becoming creative and working together. So like Sean was mentioning, you don't need to have one model, but you do need to have the commitment that recreation is important and you want to do something about it. The last one is the expertise, and it happens on a real informal basis. I know when I worked for the city of Moose Jaw in facilities, I'd get calls from small town all the time, and they would say, hey, can you come out and give us a hand with this? I got foam in my brine line. What am I supposed to do about it? And you go out, you give them a hand, and you don't think much of it. But then later on, if I needed some extra bleachers for a slow pitch tournament or something, hey, do you mind, lending me the bleachers? So that kind of informal stuff goes on, but wouldn't it be nice if we could kind of formalize it and then say, let's do this on a number of different levels and show how it can be effective. So what support is out there? Well, from SUMA's perspective, and I certainly can't speak on behalf of SUMA, but I know Sean can if you'd like to talk to him afterwards, but there is the Municipal Capacity Development Program. And it is a program between the SUMA, SARM, and the government, where they actually have people that want to work with municipal leaders to try and facilitate development of intermunicipal projects. So if you've got an idea you'd like to move forward with some kind of intermunicipal recreation plan, give these guys a call and they'd be happy to help you out. I can, though, however, speak on what SPRA can do. And just for those that aren't aware, Saskatchewan Parks and Recreation Association is a not-for-profit organization, and we have about 400 members. About 300 of them are municipalities, and our job is to try and support them in developing sound and beneficial recreation programs and services. Here's a map, and we have field staff in 7 different locations across the province. These field staff are extremely qualified. They've all been former recreation directors or recreation professionals in communities. They've worked with councils, they've worked with not-for-profits, they've scheduled rinks, they've run pools. They have a wealth of information, and they're there to help you out. We've got offices in La Ronge, Prince Albert, Humboldt, I'm afraid I'm going to forget one, Humboldt, Yorkton, Rosetown, Swift Current, and Weyburn. And if you, Rob's here, he's one of our field staff, and at the end, if you want to talk to Rob, he'll certainly tell you who is in your area, and he can give you their cards, so that if you want to give them a call, you certainly can. And their job is to be there for you to call them, and they'll come out and give you a hand. And I'm going to tell you how they're going to give you a hand in just a second, but they are aware of the manual we're talking about here, they're aware of what's in it, and they're aware of the processes that are involved in it and the samples that are in there. And they can certainly help you walk through it and explain some of the things that are in there for you. In addition to that, when you see the manual, and again, it was mentioned a couple of times, it's at our booth, the 108 downstairs, when you see the manual, it talks about identifying the need. And that's great, and there are some ways that you can do that in the manual, but there's also the Service Excellence Program that, again, our field staff can lead you through. It is actually a recreation evaluation process, and it takes you step by step, helps you establish your policies, helps you in your planning processes, identify some priorities and strategies for you, and helps you identify action plans. So again, it's not like, oh great, I got this manual, now what? Well, here's the manual talking about intermunicipal recreation, and there's another tool available for you to do that community assessment that's so important. And you don't do it by yourself. I mean, you certainly can. But if you've got somebody that's interested, another municipality that's interested in doing it, maybe you could do it collectively, and maybe you can start to identify what some of the gaps are in your program or what have you. So again, what it is it's community-led. You get a committee together of interested people. As we talked about, you got to have those that are compassionate. You got to have the champions out there. And then you actually lead them through a process. Now, when you see this, it looks, oh my goodness, 10 core competencies, 88, oh, I can't go through all that. I can buy that. We would like you to go through it all, but sometimes you may not have the services or the facilities that's applicable, but you can certainly take ones that you do have and walk through it. And what it is, it's a series of questions. So let's say we're talking about facility management, for example. They'll say, do you have safety procedures in place in your facility? Do you have qualified people in your facility? Do you know who they are? Do you know what the qualifications could be? There's all these kind of questions. And you go through and you say yes, no, and you've got a committee there of everybody that's in the area. You go through and you say yes, no, and then you've got yourself a really nice assessment of what you actually have in your community. And then what happens is there's an action plan. So you've decided, geez, you know, I'm really strong in my facilities, but I'm a little weak in leadership development, and I don't have much going on for kids. I don't have a joint use agreement with the school. These are some areas I got to work on. You actually talk through it, and they will actually come up with a plan for you and how you can move forward in those areas. If you're doing intermunicipal recreation, you do that collectively. So maybe one organization or one town has this as a benefit or something to do well. Maybe you've got something else. How can you work together to benefit the entire municipal structure that you're trying to serve? And finally, again, I'm not going to just keep hammering at this because that's why we have our staff out there. They will act as your moderator if you want, or they can be your coach, or they can be your trainer or your guide. Whatever you need them to do, they'd be more than happy to come out and talk to you and lead you through the process. The next one I'd like to talk about is another tool that will help you with your regional or your intermunicipal recreation discussions. You have to know where you're at as a municipality in order to partner with someone else, and that municipality should probably know where they're at as well. We talk about structure, we talk about how important it is. This is an extremely important part of what's going on in your community. It gives you a solid base to move forward from. The problem is a lot of recreation board bylaws that are out there are 50 years old, and they've done a great job in getting things going, and there's over 700 of them in this province alone. And I bet you there is probably over 650 different models in use right now. So what we did is we took them, and we took as many, we've taken 2 years, and we've looked at all that we could, as many as we could. We couldn't look at all of them. We tried to pick out some of the ones that are maybe the basic kind of principles that are good in all of them. So they're really promising practices. The idea was to get a solid foundation so that you could then start to say, yeah, this one works for me. I like this one. I can change it. But this is the basic premise on how we want to move forward. The problem with some of the existing rec board bylaws is a lot of councils and rec boards are totally unaware that they're there, or are totally unaware of what's involved in them, or don't know what roles and responsibilities are in there. Sometimes the fiscal responsibility for budgets and stuff are left up to a committee. Probably not the best way to do it if you're supposed to be responsible to the town. So there's a number of different things that we go through that talks about, okay, why do we need to change our bylaws? Well, they're 50 years old. Things have changed. We need to know the people that negotiated them aren't around anymore. Can we do a bylaw with another municipality? For sure. And when you take a look at them, you'll see that you mitigate some of your risk. Your insurance concerns can be reduced substantially. You may be at risk right now and you don't even know it. So it's important to go back through your bylaw and find out what's in there. And to be quite honest with you, it's just sound administrative practice. So the manual itself goes through the benefits. I've talked about that. Obviously, I won't go through that again. It talks about why should you have a rec board, what's the purpose of a rec board. It talks about the legislation. There's actual legislation in the Cities Act and the Municipalities Act, in the Northern Municipalities Act about what bylaws are and why you need to have a rec board and what the responsibilities are. Talked about your insurance. What insurance do you have? Are you covered? Are your volunteers covered? Are there people that work for the city covered? You need to know these things to make sure that everyone's covered and you got the insurance you need. The biggest one that's missing in a lot of communities is the roles and responsibilities. What is the role of your rec board? How do they relate to your rink board? If you're in an intermunicipal situation, who's going to play what role? if you've got a joint rec board where you've got 3 municipalities, who plays what role, who are they answerable to, how do they report, what happens if you're losing money, what happens if you're making money. There's all these things are lined up, and you need to know them, because if you do it up front, you won't have the problems later on. And then it does an assessment. So I don't want to make it all doom and gloom, but it will assess your rec board, and you may have a perfect operating structure, and you say, you know what, I don't need to go any further with this, I'm great, and away we go. It also gives you a review of your assets. We've done a lot of asset management already in communities. It will help through there, help establish your vision, mission, and values. This is particularly important if you're going into an intermunicipal arrangement. You got to know why you're going into it. What do you want to accomplish? Are you going to be accomplishing facilities? Is it going to be program and services? What do you as municipalities see as your vision in the future? What do you see as what are you doing? And you've got to formalize that, so down the road as you move forward, you've got a concrete plan on how to move forward. Also in there is how to form a rec board and how to change one that you've got. And this is the really interesting one, is the rec board models. There are probably, out of the 600 I said we had, I think we've been able to distill it down to about 6 or 8 basic models that you need to change to make sure they meet your own local needs. But what happens on these rec board models is, do you want it to be an operational board or an advisory board? Do you want to have it as a regional kind of concept with other people, or is it just a local board? Do you have a rec director, a rec professional, or do you not? And there's all those different kind of variations. You've got to decide which ones works for you, and then you can pick that one and start to grow from there. Also in the rec board development manual, there's a whack of templates, and don't get intimidated by this number, but there's over 100 pages of templates and samples. And the reason I say don't get intimidated by that is they are there because once you pick kind of what you want to do, once you've decided with your partners how you want to move forward, there is pretty much a sample or a template for everything you could want to do. If you want to do visioning exercise, it's in there. If you want to know what an MOU is, it's in there. There's also some in this manual that we've got that are complementary. It's in there as well. If you want to talk about what should my bylaw have, it's in there. What's the duties of a rec director? It's in there. And the thing is, you don't have to go through it to figure it all out. Again, we will have field staff that are available to walk you through that. Also in there is a flow chart, which is really handy because then you can actually see, okay, council's here, here's my rec board, oh, here's my rec director if you have one, oh, here's my committees, here's my rink board, here's my seniors board, here's how it all fits together. And it gives you a good understanding of who answers to who and what the responsibilities are. At the bottom there, we talked about SPRA field staff and district staff being available to help you out. We are just launching this new, like I say, it took 2 years. We're just launching it in mid-February. We're actually having a training session with all our staff and all the district representatives that are going to be there. And we're bringing them through a 2-day session on here's what's in the guide, here's how to implement it. The field staff, of course, as I've mentioned, have worked with municipalities before, and they understand the workings of them, so they'll be a great asset to you. The next thing we're doing after that training is we're actually having a pilot projects with 3 communities, walking them through it, asking them to give us feedback to tell us what works and maybe what doesn't. By the time it's done, June or September, because a lot doesn't happen over the summer with regard to rec board development. By the time that's all said and done, we'll be able to launch it officially and have people and staff out there to give you a hand to walk you through it. So it's not just, here you go, read it, have fun. No, it will help you through it. Just got a couple more things I want to mention about tools that are out there, and then I'll shut her down for a bit. Is First Nations Rec Board Development, similar, but it's got a First Nations focus. It goes through the bylaws, purpose assessments that we already talked about, and again, we have SPRA field staff and some district staff that will also be available to help us through that. The last one I want to talk about is hiring a recreation professional. I'm going to, I talked briefly about some of the communities that are out there, and I'll give you a couple more of who's out there. But what we're finding is a lot of people are actually hiring jointly a recreation professional. They're understanding that to run facilities, whether it's rinks, pools, curling rinks, parks, soccer fields, in some places cricket pitch, they need someone that actually has experience in that. So they're hiring recreation professionals to do that. And recreation professionals are those people that have gone through school, they've got some experience, and they're actually trained to do that kind of work. So in this toolkit, it talks about why do you need a rec director. Do you really need one? Maybe you don't. But it takes you through a process of if you do, here's what to follow. It takes you through what the job description would look like. It takes you through how do you recruit them. Where do you go? Do we still go to the paper now and put ads in there? We're finding no recreation professionals, I won't say they don't read the paper, but where they go is to the websites that they're familiar with and the websites that they know will have the information they're looking for. Teaches how to screen and how to do interviews, has sample interview questions in there, what to look for in a recreation professional, and again, we'll have staff that can help you through that. What to do on a reference checks, how to give a job offer, what should be in a job offer. We've got samples of all the letters that you could possibly use. Orientation and ongoing support. And this is specifically important if you're going into a regional or a intermunicipal recreation development process. You've got to know, orientate them to the community. Who are the, not the power brokers, but who's the president of the Minor Hockey Association? Who's the president of the cultural? Who's the president of the Senior Citizen Center? All these people can have an impact on the work that your recreation professional is doing, and you should introduce them to them so they know who they are so they can work with them. Also, you have to give ongoing support, obviously. And again, there's a whack of templates and samples in there that will walk you through so that, again, you don't have to invent it. It's already there. Why would we reinvent the wheel if we already have some best practices? You take the one you like and you change it to meet your individual needs. But the fact is, it's based on some sound research, and you know that it works and it's worked in other communities. Just before I shut down, I would like to mention some of the other things that are going on. As far as some case studies, other communities that are doing some work together is the town of Elrose and the RM of Monet. They actually share some capital and some staffing. Up north, CPL it's called, it's the village of Christopher Lake, the village of Paddockwick, the RM of Paddockwood, and the district of Lakeland are getting together, and they're doing joint programming. They're paying for it collectively, and they've got an agreement that their reeves or mayors have signed, and they're also doing some work in joint use agreements. The town of Regina Beach and the village of Buena Vista are doing some staffing and some program sharing. Town of Wynyard, the RM of Elfrost and the RM of Big Quill are jointly doing their campground. Marsden and the RM of Manitou Lake and Suffern Lake Regional Park are getting together. And then in the southwest area, this brand new actually, Cabri, Tompkins, Abbey, Hazlet, and Pennant are getting together with the RMs of Murray Creek, Piepot, and Pittville to do some joint recreation programming. So there are things happening throughout the province. There are support systems out there that can help you with those things that are happening. And I would just like to say thank you very much for your time. Don't forget to go to booth 108 downstairs tomorrow. I would like to thank Harvey for all his work on putting this all together. And I would like to thank Sean and SUMA for all their work they're doing in this area. Recreation is an extremely important subject matter for councils and people to talk about. It does give your community resiliency, it gives you a feeling of connectedness, and it makes the quality of life much better for everyone, and it gets people to stay in your community. So hopefully, if you're looking at any kind of municipal, intermunicipal recreation stuff, or just within your own community, talk to SUMA, give us a call at SPRA. And if you want to talk to someone, Rob will be here at the end, and he can certainly tell you what's happening in your area. So thank you very much. Sorry I probably went a little bit longer than I should have, but geez, I just get so excited about this stuff, which is kind of weird too. But thank you very much for your attention, and hopefully you'll be able to use our services. And I think I'll turn it over to Eric for if there's any questions. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much to all of our presenters. I'll now invite them up on stage here. Norm, Sean, and Harvey. And I'll open the floor up for any questions or any comments or anything that you or your municipality would like to ask of our three experts. I know I was very interested in hearing about this project as the City of Saskatoon is just talking regionalism with a number of our partners out in the outlying areas, Warman, Martinsville, the arm of Corman Park, and Osler. So we're going to be looking at many different aspects of regional planning, of which recreation is going to be a big part. So if there's any questions or comments, feel free to step up to the microphone. Okay. Go ahead, sir.
On one of your slides, you there was an indication of economic spin-offs. Now, with our downturn in the oil economy going on right now, that's kind of a big subject for creating jobs. What have you found in some of your models that we could take back to our community that says, if you do this, perhaps there's an opportunity for somebody to create a business?
Testing. Oh, can you hear me there? Okay. The economic spin-offs are there's some direct ones, as you talked about, the wage increase, or the wages for lifeguards and that kind of thing. Then there's the more intangible ones as far as what happens in a community where you have a lot of recreation activities. It brings in tourism to your community. It brings in people. We've done some economic benefit studies around what is the actual amount of money that you can brings into a community. Say that you have a hockey tournament, for example. We've taken some ideas around, okay, well, we know there's going to be so much money already spent in the community, and if you bring in people, this is new money into the community, so that's good for the people that are in town doing the business. It's good for the community as a whole. With the economic downturn, it'll be based on how much are people going to travel. So, for example, we're talking about special events, whether they're the festivals or whether they're hockey tournaments or what have you. A lot of that will depend on how much people plan to travel. On the one hand, gas is cheaper, so they may be willing to travel more often, but on the other hand, some of them may be out of work, so they may not. So it's pretty tough to connect it to anything that's happening economically with a downturn, but we do know there are economic benefits for communities that have quality recreation programs.
I can just give one example in a separate area of my life involved with a group of theater organizations in the community that I'm from. A number of organizations in music, dance, and theater, so from the cultural side, did a joint project with the municipal government to create a theater center. So this center is operated for 25 years now. It's totally managed and run and financed by the nonprofits themselves. The city doesn't contribute to it except through occasional project funding, but not on a regular, sustainable basis. So we can calculate that out of a cultural center, that cultural center has a $200,000 plus annual budget. It creates that budget. That budget didn't exist and wouldn't exist if they didn't exist. It creates that in terms of its salaries and its contributions to infrastructure and so forth in the community. In addition, it rents out its facilities to organizations in the community. Each of them can then calculate the amount of economic turnover they turn over with every single event that they put on there. So for us, it's a sort of a living example of how if the community, the municipal government, the community can partner, there's a real numeric basis for measuring the economic value, even of a cultural facility.
Hi, Bruce Evans from the town of White City. You had mentioned, one of you gentlemen had mentioned that there are several intermunicipal agreements in place where RMs have voluntarily committed to provide some revenues to the surrounding towns. Are there any templates or examples that we might be able to have a look at that could be applied in our region?
You can go first. I can respond to that.
There are templates and examples we can certainly provide for you, not a problem at all. I do want to make sure, and people are in this room will probably understand that it's when RMs provide money, it's a huge benefit to the community, but it doesn't happen across Saskatchewan. So
Really?
I'm doing that in the nicest way possible. But yeah, we can give you some examples, certainly. Just talk to Rob, he'll get your name and he'll get you some.
I would add the Municipal Capacity Development Program on their website has a number of different templates, and I believe there's some examples of agreements on recreation there. Whether or not they're like detailed, comprehensive examples, I'm not quite sure. In the guide itself, we provide one template of an agreement that exists within, we actually took it from Nova Scotia. It's from the town of Digby in the municipal district of Digby. They have had a regional recreation sort of arrangement for years, and it's it's quite a substantial program. They cost share on pools, hockey rinks, you name it, the list goes on and on. So,
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'm Louis Robin, town of Nipawin. Up in our northeast area, we have an organization called the Twin Lakes District Planning Commission. And one of the things that, one of the goals that we have as part of our commission is to look at regional supplying of services. And of course, recreation is part of that. But one of the things that we've done to try to think outside the box when it comes to funding recreation is to work with our RM partners on revenue sharing. And what we've done now is we've got a tripartite agreement with the two RMs that surround our community. So any commercial development, whether it occurs within the town of Nipawin or within the two RMs, that tax revenue is going to be shared between the three municipalities. So rather than having maybe direct payment coming from the municipalities to your town, maybe you could look outside the box and get them to participate at that level. That way everybody's a winner. So you just got to think outside the box is what is the message that I'd like to relay here, or relay. So.
It sounds like it works very well.
Oh, I think so.
Yeah.
We've been very successful.
Good. Good for you. Did you guys have any comments? Or?
I guess I would just say, with following up on that comment, the intent of this guide, of course, is to encourage that type of creative thinking. We quite often will quickly do the quick response of, well, we just need money, so let's go ask for money. But I think when you if you were to follow through the process, you'd have the opportunity to start thinking about, engaging your community, start to prioritize, start to determine what those strategies are and what the strategic investment is, and finding other ways to be creative when it comes to funding and providing services when it's recreational based. One of the challenges I know that I've heard from a number of municipalities, and even from the ARMs as well, is, and this is why I would say an evidence-based approach is quite beneficial, and that is trying to determine really what you want. What are the expectations? I mean, you may have a town that actually borders 4 different RMs. So how do you engage, those 4 different municipalities and have a conversation around, what's that equal share if they even want to participate in it, right? It's not a cut and dry type conversation. It's quite complex, and it's, that's why we're saying it's important to have that structured process and have those conversations in place. And we hope that this guide will provide you with the foundation to be able to do that. So.
Just one other comment. One of the things we heard from some of our communities is looking at ways to take advantage of some of the bulk buying that's happening through SUMA and stuff. So in cases of if you're buying soda pop, or I won't say any trade name, if you're buying soda pop for your rinks, can you collectively do it? If you're buying propane for your machines, is there a way to collectively do it and get some savings? And I know SUMA's been doing some work on that, and I know we've had some initial talks, so that might be another way of trying to find ways to collaborate, and that hopefully can lead to a more structured and more formal kind of thing as you start to realize the benefits.
Okay, well, if there's no more comments or questions, I'd like to thank all 3 of you.
So, Eric, I guess I just have while we have the opportunity here, just a quick question. The people in the crowd, how many are either have a current agreement, some sort, maybe it's very formal, maybe it's a shake agreement, or at least have started to have that conversation around trying to formalize a recreation agreement within their municipality? Okay, so this is a handful of you. Okay, and perhaps maybe someone's willing to share, what are some of the challenges you're running into right now? The age of the agreement? Actually, if I could get you the mic.
Can I
sorry.
get you to just step up to the mic? That'd be great. Then we can capture it all on
Rod
recording.
Marfleet from Maidstone. We're in the RM of Eldon, and like I say, our agreements are 50 years old, like you say, and just trying to update them is the problem now. And our RM is an affluent RM where there's lots of revenue, and to get like from our council's point of view, our town. You're both municipalities complement each other. Your RM, the people from your RM use your town facilities, and the town needs the RM's monies to support your recreation. And to get that, like the template is a good idea, but to find that balance and to be able to work with both municipalities is the hard thing. You know, how do you go to approach your RM to give more monies when they say you know, per capita we're giving all we can, but yet you know there are more monies there to be available to the for your rec facilities. And while I'm up here, like I'll say that we do have a hockey rink, a curling rink, bowling alleys, lots of sporting facilities, but how do we get people to use them? You know, our bowling club started off with a bang. Now they're down. Soccer used to be a big thing. We developed soccer pitches. Now soccer's down. Ball's back up. You know, more kids are involved in ball. To strike that balance so that everybody gets a little bit of the pie, and that's kind of the problem that we're facing now, and we're trying to move ahead from there.
Well, I think an answer to the second part in terms of how you get people to use it, talk to an organization like SPRA. I'm sure they have a number of different strategies and individuals who can help out with that, right?
Oh, yeah. No, it's not a problem that is just in your community. It's happening across the province. How do you identify the trends? How do you build your facilities based on what trends you see coming? And then when that trend changes, what do you do with the facilities you have? There's been a lot of work into taking facilities that have been used for, say, curling or for senior centers or what have you, and moving it over to different things. The idea of the skateboard parks, where do they fit into a community's design? And we've talked about, you know, the permanent ones and some of the more temporary ones. Well, what's the risk around temporary ones and all that kind of stuff. So all I guess I can say is if you've got some specific things that you want to talk, we'll talk to our field staff. They'll find out for you. We've got all kinds of research we do. We interrelate with other organizations like ours across the country. So we don't have all the answers necessarily, but we can sure work with you to try and figure out what to do.
I would say to the communities that are in the process or talking about trying to establish some relationships, pick up the guide tomorrow. I think there's a lot of useful information there that will help you, particularly the templates. We spent a tremendous amount of time looking at, you know, what are the types of questions that you need to begin that conversation, and a lot of that information's in there. It may not, you know, not everything is necessarily, this isn't the, you know, the silver bullet to all your solutions, but at least it's a good start, and I think it'll provide you some good foundations.
Did anybody else want to share their story? Go ahead, sir.
Hi, I'm Clayton Schneider with the town of Davidson. I just wanted to add, like the fire service that we were talking about, most of us have agreements with their surrounding RMs with that. What the town of Davidson did is we used that kind of as a template for doctor recruiting, and then from there what it did was it built relationships, and you guys touched on that, and that's definitely been key for us. For the recreation side, we're in talks right now, but you need something documented, as you also said before. But as a start, I would encourage you to look at the service contract with the fire and rescue or emergency and see what that looks like. And it's a great start. Anyways, that's it. Sorry.
Thank you.
David Tran, I'm mayor of the town of Nipawin. I'd just like to reiterate what one of my councillors said. Prior to the commission being formed in Nipawin with 9 municipalities, it was very hard to work regionally at all. This commission that was put together is a catalyst for the future for us. And we have one of the RMs around us is the second largest landmass in Saskatchewan. And they have 3 smaller towns that have recreation services right now. And so one of the comments that the RMs would make would be, we can't give to you because we'd have to give to our other municipalities that are around them. So Councillor Robin had said that through this planning commission we now have a revenue sharing agreement, and that is the way that they're helping to fund, or they will be helping to fund. So it's very important to work regionally in that regard. So.
Well, thank you. That's any comment? No? I think unless there's any more questions or comments, we'll wrap it up and go from here. But I think what the one big pushing point is, was just said, and that's, it's all about building relationships. It's about trust. There's a lot of trust that has to be involved between municipalities and RMs and partners. But, you know, you have to take the first step if you want to make it work. And I think with this guide, it'll allow more of us to take that first step. So on behalf of all of us, I'd like to say thank you very much, Sean, Harvey, and Norm. And thank you. Thank you for coming.